start on the west side.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Hello, everyone. Calling the Penn One board to order. Claudio Campuzano is out. PJ Christopher.
Is present. No.
Jeff Noodleman.
Present.
James Allison is present. Annalisa Kohler will be late. We have quorum. Thank you.
Pen 2.
This is Val Humble, calling Pen 2 to order. I am present. Karen Myers,
Karen's here.
Mary Helen's here.
and Kathy Kellen.
Present.
I don't see Eric. Is Eric Molander present?
I don't believe so.
Pen 2 is in order.
MCDD.
Right, this is Ken Anderton is here present, calling MCD board to order. Kenzie,
Present.
Nancy,
I'm present.
Corky,
Here.
and MCD is called to order.
I did not see Nikki.
I did not see her as well, so, but we'll announce when she does get here.
And as for SDIC, it's just Ken and I at this time. When Annalise shows up, we will be in quorum. So this meeting is being recorded, just for clarification. Wendy, any public testimony at this time?
There's none.
Thank you. Well, moving right along here. Andrew, you're providing baseline services.
Yeah, thank you. Bill is going to kick us off here and then I'll dive into that. So Bill.
Yep. Thanks, Andrew. Welcome, everyone. I'll just make some opening comments about asset management and then turn the bulk of the presentation over to Andrew. Just as a reminder, the board's passed a resolution back in 2020 to help provide some direction for staff to explore and implement principles of asset management that could benefit the districts where appropriate. For your own reference, I've added the definition of asset management in the chat. Just as a reminder, Andrew will walk through some components of this particular project, but I wanted just to reemphasize this is a set of principles that we're going to be adopting over time, and it's consistent with best practices for utilities. For those who are in that industry already, you're well aware of the term, and we're trying to apply those as appropriate to our special district as well. So we've done some work on this for the last several years to get it off the ground. You all got engaged in 2020 to identify policy objectives, which was in that resolution, that 2020 resolution. We also recognize that this is the information that the level of service information that Andrew's talking about today is going to be an important step to help clarify what we do as the four special districts now to support what the new urban district will be doing moving forward. So these baseline levels of service should help clarify what staff and the boards provide as terms of services, and so the new urban district can use that as a baseline to develop their own levels of service under the new objectives that they have under ORS 550. So it's helpful for y'all to help clarify what services we offer as districts, but it also helps the new urban district as they form as well. So just a couple of brief comments. Let me turn the bulk of the rest of the time about this project back to Andrew. Thanks.
Thanks for going over that, Bill. So yeah, this what is in front of you, I'm sorry there's not a page number, but on the PDF list of the packet, I guess it would be page 3 and 4. are the primary things that I wanted to walk through today. But as Bill mentioned, the resolution passed in 2020 identified a need to refine district levels of service as a goal of the asset management program. Additionally, I believe it was 2019 MCDD strategic plan also identified the need to establish or refine the levels of service for the districts. I want to just take a step back. I know I'm sort of repeating this as you've all heard it a lot, but levels of service are really statements of what it is that we intend to deliver as an organization. And I think that we all have sort of a general picture of the direction that we're going, the area in which we provide services, but I think we struggle a little bit more to say this is the specific exact thing in which we are actually delivering. And so the purpose of level of service is really to set that target. And from an asset management standpoint, we then look at the way that we're delivering services today and say, are we meeting those objectives? Are we not? If not, what ways do we need to change or adjust our operations to make sure that we're meeting that expected level? Levels of service project started out of figuring out a framework of how to approach that. So we selected a framework put together by the Municipal Finance Officers Organization of Ontario, Canada. Asset management is quite more institutionalized in Canada than it is in the United States currently, though it is sort of an international best practice. So we looked at several frameworks, picked their framework, and that really helped us walk through what we needed to identify to start setting these and refining these levels of service. And so early in about January of 2022, many of you contributed feedback on the ideas of what it was that you perceived that success was from your perspective as board members and also representatives of the community. Staff also provided feedback. And then we had several public outreach studies that had been done in the past that we tied in. And in February, we reviewed a series of statements. It was about 30 statements that aim to articulate the needs and expectations of this board and staff in the community in this very little I'm wanting to recognize that it was not a comprehensive opportunity for all stakeholders involved to provide input, but that we had quite a bit of varied input from different stakeholder groups and different sources to come up with these statements. The boards provided feedback as well as the executive team, and we integrated that feedback into those statements and consolidated them down into what in your board packet says strategic levels of service for the conveying system and as well as the levy system. There was a lot of consolidation that happened. We wanted this to be fairly, not too arduous of 30 different levels of service, but these 4 kind of core services about reliable and resilient infrastructure, partnerships and community access, environmental impacts, and informed public. So a working group of staff worked to consolidate the information provided by you and those other sources into these statements to capture the essence of what it is that seemed most important for us to deliver. We then went through an exercise of developing some technical levels of service that we believed that we could use to sort of measure or as points to say, yes, we're accomplishing this, no, we're not. And then come up with a means to move forward from, so then the next step is to measure how we're doing in that area to determine how we want to move forward. Now, because we're in this transitory period between districts, we decided that we're not going to go so far as trying to establish targets for us to achieve. What we want to do is say, this is actually what we're delivering today now in reality, so that the urban district can use that as a basis of understanding the services provided by the current drainage districts to then say, okay, well, what do we want to do in the future and how are we going to go about getting there? What's not shown here is there are several more columns in these tables around metrics and measures and targets that we could use to report on these things. Those are not wholly fleshed out. They're very much a draft, but hopefully a good starting place as the urban district goes into conversations about its own levels of service, of ways that we could go about measuring these. I really want to create space for any questions. We are ultimately going to, at the next format meeting, ask for an approval or adoption of these levels of service. And what I'm really wanting to know is that the boards here today feel comfortable with these being sort of the core areas in which are expected to continue to be provided by the urban districts as they pick up operations. Understanding that this is only about the conveyance systems and the levy systems and doesn't touch on things like outreach or finance or any of the new urban district charges, but just really focused on these topical areas. The one area that's missing that I had hoped to get to this year, but unfortunately, with Brian's departure as the emergency manager, is for the core service area of emergency response. That's an area that we should still probably really flesh out. It wasn't in the original scope of the project. We hoped to add it, but it just didn't happen. So there's still a lot of unknowns. There's still a lot of work to do, but we do believe that what's presented here reflects the core areas in which we do work and the most important services that we provide within these core service areas. I know that was a lot of talking, trying to get through this fairly quick for you guys, but I really want to open up space for any questions or thoughts that you guys have, any trepidation you have. The one last note that I would say is, in reading through your packet, I realized that there was there was one typo, something that was copy and pasted said levy in 2 places. One of them should say internal drainage. And then for consistency's sake, there's conveyance and internal drainage used interchangeably. And per Colin's request, because the new district is using conveyance and not internal drainage as their means of communicating that, I want to change those up. So the draft that we bring to you next time will have those language changes just for clarification.
I'd like to open it up for questions for Andrew and Bill.
I did see, Ken, thank you for the comment in the chat. I'm gonna read through it. It looks like James has a question.
James,
Just
go
a
ahead.
quick comment and quick question. Sorry for turning off my camera. My internet's not great today. So Bill, Andrew, I just want to compliment you for starters on this, on a few things. One is trying to establish, I guess, in some ways, document the baseline of what we are doing right now, what we can achieve, so that that's a product or document that the new district can take and move from with that larger expanded mission. So I think this is great. A couple of comments. One would be, if we're planning on approving this in some way through resolution in a month, it might not be a bad idea to post this online and allow for comments by the board. Not sure what you'll get, but it may be better, a good use, an efficient use of time to collect some comments or questions around these areas. The second comment is, as you look, for the columns we can't see. So I see what you've done here. I like the strategic level, the technical level, and it looks like in the technical level, you're aimed at things you can measure, you could measure. So it would be good to know. It would be good maybe for the board to see what it is that we would measure and report on. And I say that with a little bit of caution, in that, you know, staff at every public agency I've ever worked with get really ambitious around metrics. And so I would say be minimalistic and measure and report on what is really, at the end of the day, important to board members and landowners, and don't create a whole new program around monitoring for yourself. And I'll give an example of that. I work for a large wastewater, stormwater utility, and we have performance measures for city budget office, for the city, essentially. The budget measures we report on, you can count on less than one hand, because it's built really, at least for that purpose, been reduced down to some very core things that the public wants us to measure, and they want to know the trend. So anyway, with that, those are my brief comments. Again, nice job. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I see both Mary Helen and Nancy have their hands up.
Nancy, I think you're next, and then Mary Helen.
Thank you. So yeah, we're doing a lot of level of service in my day job. And there is a lot of discussion what is strategic level of service, what's technical level of service, and all around the columns that you're not showing us that I'm sure you guys are having a lot of discussion about. I guess what I'd say is going from levels of service that are in people's heads to levels of service that are written down, particularly the strategic, and what you're showing us here, I think is a huge step. I think it would be good to, I guess, bless these. I think another comment period could be fine, as James suggested, that would be great. But I think it would be good to bless these. And then if you're gonna do metrics, you know, you have a 2 or 3 year span, and then the level of service can be looked at by the new agency. So there's, I guess I'm doing the same caution that James is. Maybe it's like, you know, figure out when good enough is, and then continue on, because you could spend a lot of time. I know it's super interesting, and I think it's mostly about what the outcomes are. Are people flooding? Are we making things worse or better? That kind of thing. And I think that, yeah, and I would save any specific comments for a comment period, but nice job putting this together. I know it's a huge chunk of work.
Thanks, Nancy. Mary Helen?
My question's pretty much the same way. The F-15s are flying by, so if you hear those, I can't do anything about that, except maybe play the Top Gun theme. Karen probably hearing them too. Maybe even Val. Yes, so I sort of hear Top Gun Maverick when this goes by. My questions are maybe not as less technical, but my first reaction is the primary goal is flood safety and emergency response, and you explained that, so I appreciate that. But I think that definitely needs to be in here because that's a big piece of what will happen if we do have a flood incident. My other is it's really good to get these on paper, but my question is the cost. These seem very ambitious, and so my comment would be, if the new board doesn't get the amount of funding that they want, or they get way more funding than they want, what can be accomplished and how that would be accomplished. So, and just a really simple one that I could pick on was the host a flood education event. You know, the cost of doing something like that, that could be something that could fall off the table, be another day. It's important, but if we don't have the funding for the staff to accomplish these things, you know, sort of the what if statement. And I didn't see or understand, and you can tell me how to understand, but event sponsorships. How many can we afford? Can we afford any? That kind of sense would be helpful to I think the urban district board members that aren't a part of this discussion. And I don't know their reaction to, do they have to accept what we say? Or can the urban district say, we want to do something else? And I don't know where that dynamic comes in. Maybe Jim can explain, but I think if I were a non-format board member that was told this is what you're going to do, or these are the kinds of things we're going to accomplish, I might have some questions or reactions.
Can I respond really quickly? So I appreciate you bringing that up. I don't think the intention here is to say this is what the new board must do. And I want to add in here, just for everybody's information, the state of our assets report this year is looking at the conveyance system and the internal drainage system, and its intention is really to take a look at these and take a look at our current infrastructure systems and really say, this is how we're doing. So for pump station 2 drainage basin, for the things on this list, this is how it's going in that basin right now. That's not saying we are going to deliver X level. It's just saying, here's a picture of the way things are today. And I think that is informational to the boards now, and for us to be able to communicate with our stakeholders about what services are being provided. And then in the context of the urban district, I think they can look at this and say, we now have a really clear picture of what has historically been being provided. Do we want to do something different? Do we want to do more? Do we want to do less? And I would imagine, and I don't want to speak out of turn here because I'm not necessarily involved in that process, but I think that's the conversation to be had. And this is just a piece of the puzzle that gives them a foundation to work from. They may want to get rid of some pieces. They may want to expand, and I have no idea. This just tells them where these 4 organizations are at today. I hope
that's really helpful. I have a tiny little project that I do, and I have to be responsible, and everybody wants us to do all sorts of things, but I have to say, well, find the money, or I have to find the money, or I have to find the capacity. So, in a big, broader sense, this was a wonderful document and it helped. I just wanted to clarify in my head, and without going back and looking at the minutes of what we adopted. And I mean, I think this will be great groundwork as we go forward in dealing with the public on the difference. So thank you very much for everybody that worked on this.
For sure. Thank you. Kenzie and Corky, you both have your hands up. And also, I'm not sure what our time is looking like. So please, Wendy, jump in or let me know.
We actually have time. Kenzie, before you answer, I saw Jim added a comment in about the level of service. Jim, do you want to pick up on that question from Nancy?
Yeah, I mean, Nancy's correct that this is really for the existing districts, because we committed to you to bring these to you, but they will certainly be helpful as we work with the urban board to frame out the new revenue model and what the priorities are for whatever revenue we're able to generate. So it's really designed to inform, not to control the decisions, but it helps us to be able to inform you all and the community that, hey, we have some gaps, or we have some needed maintenance or other things that need to happen. And so you need to factor that into your decision-making about where to invest your resources. So that's the intent. Now, hopefully to get us on a more, I don't want to say digital, but a more consistent way of thinking about this, so we plan ahead really thoughtfully for all of the needs we have to maintain the system. That's the long-term goal here. I hope that answers questions. If not, I'm sure Andrew or Bill will be more articulate about this than I will be.
Jim, it's always going to be a balancing of other district priorities and what we can afford. We're not locked in at these aspirational service levels if we have a capital demand, that has higher precedence. So
that is absolutely right.
Great. Kenzie, thank you for waiting.
Of course. I think this is really valuable work to help us all structure our thinking. One quick recommendation for consideration, it's aligned with the theme that's been coming up. How this is framed, I think it might be helpful to just make it clear that this is dynamic, and it will be once we get to the point where we are kind of establishing an expectation of levels of service. That's not something that's locked in forever. It's something that as the world changes around us, we will kind of reassess. And it might be helpful to think ahead and note what the process or cadence of that reassessment will be.
I appreciate that. That's really important. In the framework that we use, one of the things that it starts with is that it's very explicit that this is a fluid thing that should be revisited as the needs of stakeholders and the financial dynamics and all of the complexities change. So it's very much not intended to be fixed in time. It's just a tool to communicate and to orient staff towards a specific target. And that target can move as the board's deem is needed and appropriate, for sure. So thanks for bringing that up.
Thanks, Kenzie. Corky?
Yeah, Andrew, you mentioned that the Canadians are a little further along on this than Americans in general, and that caught my attention. It's like, good, let's follow their example. That's wonderful. And then a little bit later, both Nancy and James had I thought, some very astute and very useful comments. I really appreciated what they were saying. My question for you, Andrew, is did what they say conflict at all with what you were seeing coming out of Canada?
No, I don't think anybody has shared anything that I see as conflicting. I think people are spot on, and I'm really grateful and glad to hear that other organizations like BES and others are working on this, and that the boards are not just aware through these presentations, but aware through other professional avenues about the complexities and implications of this, because I do think it's really complex. So I definitely appreciate the feedback. I think it's spot on. There's nothing that was brought up that was at all surprising or concerning, and I'm just really grateful to get such thoughtful and quality feedback. The thing that I guess I would say that it's really, and Nancy touched on this is really hard. It's complicated, it's emotional, it's political. One of the challenges that I've heard a lot is that if we say this is the bar, if we set a target and we are like, we will deliver this, then we've created an obligation for investment to deliver that very specific thing. And so we want to be really careful to say, we are aspiring to meet the community's needs through these specific avenues, and we'll invest appropriately and responsibly to work towards that end. But it's not a, we will do X. And I think making sure that we're careful in that is going to be a really important part of the communication piece. So Nancy just said BS is also leaning on lessons learned in Canada in the comments. So it's good to know that's a resource.
Bill, you have your hand up.
I do, thanks. I wanted just to respond back to Ken's comment that he put it on the chat. He is accurate in that these statements are relatively vague. We've talked about metrics that we do have in subsequent columns over to the right that you cannot see in this version. And the intent there is to apply those metrics this coming year, as Andrew alluded to identify what our state of our assets are. And based on that, if the boards were to continue as they are and the new district wasn't forming, the intent was to collect that information this next year on the state of the assets with those metrics, and then let these four boards decide what the target should be based on that information. So there's no specificity right now on what the level of the services. These are more service statements, I suppose, but they lean towards metrics and targets. And so I hope that's adequate for your consumption for the time being.
Thanks, Bill. And I have to give Nikki credit because she's the one that compiled that good question.
Jim?
Yeah, and I would just share that we've had some conversations about the actual measures themselves, and some of them are activity-based, like, how many events did we hold? How many people did we mail? We also want to be cognizant of the need to get some outcome measures. So, did people's attitudes change? Are they more aware of who we are and what we do? Or did the pump last longer because we upped our annual lubrication schedule? So again, we're working on those. And I think, as Nancy and James and some others have told us, it's complicated. And so they're not going to be perfect. And we're always going to be evaluating them and kind of trying to measure how much does it cost to collect that data versus the benefit to management and the board, and shaping decisions about how to invest. So it's going to be a work in progress for a while, but we really do need to start to hang to something that we are accountable for. And I think if we don't meet some of the targets once they're established, we're likely to have a really good story to tell about why. And that's okay too. And that should inform the decision-making going forward. So a lot more work to do, but it's kind of a lifestyle, right? We have to do it every day in order to get good at it. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Any further questions for Andrew or Bill?
If not, let me offer this recap. Y'all would like to see this information and digest it a little bit longer. We'll offer to add the metrics that we were planning to use for this next stage. So you have that information and can comment on those. So those could be used in the next project as Andrew's starting for the state of the assets. But know that, recognize that this will continue to be a work in progress, and the targets will need to be set at a later date, either by these boards, or the new urban district. So those targets will not be part of the resolution for next month. So any adjustments to that?
Bill, does that include, like I mentioned, urban district board members, giving them this information? Maybe that's not fruitful at this time, but because I hear this through the format meetings and then through the urban district meetings, I get the benefit or detriment of hearing it a couple times. But I'm just trying to think of the people that would hear this for the first time and what their reaction might be, or if they can comment, and maybe I don't know the process or how best the experts that do this kind of thing, if you want to involve them. I'm not saying putting on the website and ask everybody that goes to the website to look at it, because I think a whole lot more people are doing that now that they're becoming more aware of what quote unquote the drainage district does and why they have that property tax amount on their tax sheets. But so I don't know if it would be beneficial to get them, or way too much trouble to have to try to respond and explain to them. And I'm good with both answers. So
it's an interesting thought. I think our objective will be to, at the staff level, to be keeping these in mind as we work with you on the revenue development. And then, as Bill and Andrew shared, and again, we can change this based on board direction, but we wanted to, as a staff, go and collect some of this information for the next year, and then we would have a baseline that would help inform future decision-making. But again, we're always looking for ways to integrate these two things. This one's a little bit of an outlier because we had made a commitment to you all to advance this work, and we see huge value for it for the urban district. But because we don't have the revenues established, it's hard to get the goals right. So I think it's going to be a little bit iterative, I guess is what I'm saying. But I don't know whether there's more direction. We're, as a staff, definitely thinking about this as we're building up some scenarios for the revenue work for the urban district.
And the only thing I would add to Jim's description there is that from my perspective, this is y'all's product. This is your information you would hand to the new urban district, similar to the assets and liabilities report that you did a little over a year ago. And they could take that information and use as is. But this is a reflection of your work, and they can modify it as needed. We certainly could do an informational session or presentation to them similar to the assets and liabilities report, if they so choose.
Yeah, I don't want to stir up more work for you, so do what's going to work best for you, and we'll just support your work. I can't speak for everybody. Thank you.
Andrew, you had closing comments?
Yeah, I was just, thank you. Mary Helen and all, I think that really where the most useful information for the urban district board is in this is going to be through that state of the assets report that really reports back on how the current district's infrastructure is doing in these areas. That will really provide them a foundation to understand where they're at. I think aside from that, though, getting this notion of what levels of service are to that board, I think is going to be really important. I'm not sure where that lands, but I do think that the framework that we've used, and now staff has some experience going through that framework, can be valuable when it's time for that new district to start setting their levels of service. But I think the deliverable to hand over, similar to the assets and liabilities report, is going to be that state of the assets report that really ties all of this together. And thank you for everybody's time. There's a few questions in the chat, and I'll respond to people directly there.
There is a deadline question if we're accepting additional comments, which it sounds like we would appreciate from board members, and we want to bring this to the next format meeting in a slightly refined state based on that feedback. What is the deadline for these awesome volunteer board members to get you feedback on the draft?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And Bill, I'm going to punt that to you. I'm leaving for 2 weeks on vacation tomorrow, so I'm not going to be around to facilitate that after today. So
how about 2 weeks from now?
That's great. I don't want to put bounds or constraints on anybody, but if that works, then that's great. We'll send something out.
And we could do longer if you guys would like, because I think we have some time before the next format meeting.
2 weeks works really well for me.
Okay.
Wonderful discussion. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your support.
Moving on to our next item, the fixed billing proposal. And I show Ben, and I'm sure Keith will be talking or stepping in as well.
Yeah, I'll kick this off while Ben is getting the PowerPoint loaded. So this presentation today is step 2 of 3 in this proposal. The initial step 1 we had at the last format meeting, and that was an initial discussion on kind of the problem statement and where we thought we could go in terms of moving to simplifying the billing approach. Today's discussion will be more detail on it. And then finally, the third step, if we get consensus on the detailed recommendations, is to move to an IGA amendment. And that would be the actual implementation step for changing the billing approach here. So a quick, in terms of what we're going to cover today, we're going to do a quick review on the issues and the items we covered at the last meeting. This was the issue statement with the current billing method, the objectives and why we're making a proposal to change it, and then the metrics for success we would have in a new billing approach. Then we'll move into a more detailed discussion and recommendation on how we would implement this. And then based on that, again, the final, we conclude with next steps and where we would go. So I covered this last month at the format meeting, but just to restate, the current practice has some issues. It served us well for many, many years, but it is very time intensive. We estimate in terms of the hours on a monthly basis required to track all the costs and bill them is about 1 FTE of staff time. And for an agency our size, we think we can make better use of that staff time. The current method also leaves gaps. We've made some modifications to our billing rates and our overhead to close some of these gaps, but it does not fully close the gaps. And when we have gaps in cost recovery, that means MCDD is effectively subsidizing work done in the other districts. And finally, the current method, because we're we can't it requires us to estimate the billings from other districts to or from MCDD to the other districts over the course of a year. That leaves risk in that getting that estimate exactly right is very difficult or impossible. And that leaves risk of either revenue shortfalls to MCDD or over expenditures for the other districts. So the objectives we set out in this proposal is to reduce the administrative burden or the staff time being spent on tracking all of the staff time and equipment costs and billing them every month to the other districts for basic service levels. And also to achieve some revenue and expense certainty as we're going through the budget process to eliminate those risks of under recovery or over expense. And then finally, to establish our metrics for success in a new billing method, the amount established for a fixed fee billing would have to be accepted as fair by both the payer and the recipient. The new approach has to ease administrative burden. We can't come up with something that's as complicated or more complicated and as what we're doing right now, because the whole intent on doing this is to eliminate that staff administrative time. And then in the same vein, our implementation has to be simple enough that the effort to change it doesn't exceed the benefit. Again, we're looking at this as a 2 to 3 year life for this change. So we can't do something that would take us 6 months to get there or require a significant amount of staff time. It's just simply not worth it at that point. To quote Jim's comments at our last meeting, we don't have to do this. We can continue doing exactly what we're doing, and this only makes sense if it really achieves efficiencies. And the whole point on this one is just good government and efficiencies and making sure we have productive use of staff time. So with these in mind, we do have some recommendations for how the detailed implementation could look. And I will turn it to Ben at this point to cover those.
Thanks, Keith. One of the things that we received some feedback and some conversations with some board members on this. One of the things that we wanted to provide to the boards today is some context regarding the subsidy that MCDD has been providing in the past. So we're providing this as an example. If we look at just fiscal year 2020-21, MCDD incurred just over $5 million in personnel costs. And instead of tracking our time through our timesheets and through the equipment that we use, if we instead looked at that cost, that $5 million, and allocated it proportionally by the accessible square feet in each of the districts, you can see that in the table at the top of the slide. MCDD comprises about 67% of total accessible square feet across the managed floodplain. So if we were to instead apportion that $5 million through those percentages, MCDD incurred over $500,000 over and above its 67% of that accessible area. Again, this is just an example of the kind of subsidy that we have seen in the past. We're not proposing to close this gap. We just wanted to provide some context for the boards. So with that, we wanted to review briefly the steps that we've taken to date. And Keith already mentioned some of these. In May, we directly allocated some staff time to the urban district. What this does is it reduces the allocable cost to the other districts. Also in May, we implemented we floated the concept that we're proposing today, this fixed services billing, to the boards. The boards asked us to return with some more information. Also in June last month, we delivered a preliminary fixed MCD services billing proposal, and the boards again asked us to return with some more details. And here we are today with those details requested. So when we looked at what we would propose to achieve these efficiencies, we looked at some criteria. We looked at equitable distribution of costs across the district. the ease of communicating the methodology to stakeholders, the ease of implementation, and the ease of administration after implementation. Like Keith was saying, it's really not worth us to implement something more complex or that would take a tremendous amount of staff time, because we're only looking at holding this methodology for the next 2 or 3 years. We also reviewed several fixed fee calculation methodologies. The second bullet point is the one that we proposed. So of course we can keep doing what we're doing currently, like Keith mentioned. Our proposal is to look back 5 years and develop a trend line and forecast out and use that trend line for the fixed fees going forward based on actual billings in the past 5 years. That's our proposal. Alternatively, we could look at the budget for the subsequent year or the actual expenditures in the prior year and allocate those expenses on an agreeable basis. For example, acres, levy miles, or property value. That's an alternative. We're not proposing to move in that direction. We could also allocate costs of each staff person based on estimated time spent in each district. Now, looking at these things, we concluded that the most fair or cost-effective way to achieve our ultimate goal is to implement some efficiency here and to spend staff time more wisely, would be the trend line methodology, looking at the actual billings over the last 5 years and forecasting that out over the next 2 or 3 years. This provides a fair distribution of MCDD service costs, and it provides the desired ease of implementation and administration after implementation. So financially, just comparing next year's budget and now this year, sorry, excuse me. So just started July 1. So comparing our budget to our proposal, it would be in total about $60,000 more revenue to MCDD. And it would be varied across Penn 1, 2, and SDIC. So it would be slightly different from what we budgeted for you, but those districts can accommodate those changes in their budget if this proposal is approved. Also, we included more details on what the financials would look like in the memo, in the board packet. So our proposal is to replace our monthly variable service billings, time and materials, with a fixed annual billing. Projects would still be billed separately in addition to those fixed monthly or quarterly billings. Our proposal would be to base those billings on a historical trend line in the past 5 years of actual billings. It would be to maintain our historical service levels, so there would be no reduction in services that each of the districts has received over in the past. Our proposal would be to bill these service costs on a quarterly basis to facilitate cash flow. And also the timing of the implementation is really dependent upon the boards, what they choose. So if there's consensus today and the boards ask us to come back with revised intergovernmental agreements next month, then we would propose to implement this as of July 1. However, if that timeline is different, then the timing of implementation would be different. We wanted to provide some shared understanding of definitions, some of the definitions of the terms that we're using. So when we talk about maintenance fees would be included in the fixed annual billings. These are scheduled routine levee and pump station maintenance work. Project would be a discrete, unique scope of work, planned or unplanned, with a definitive beginning and end date. And therefore, project fees, any costs, staff time, or direct costs associated with those projects, whether that would be capital or non-capital, would continue to be billed directly to each district. And when we talk about administrative fees, you'll notice in the board packet information, the administrative fees is the largest component of these service fees. Those include, but are not limited to, the board support, purchasing, information technology, finance, accounting, and audit work, and other central services. And those basically represent the staff time associated with each of those activities. We wanted to also provide you some examples of the elements included in the fixed fees versus projects that would be billed separately. So I'll let you read the slide, but I wanted to summarize it for you. So anything that's routine, that's a regular maintenance, that's a repair that does not require an on-call contract. So we have existing on-call contracts that we use all the time for our regular maintenance. So anything that's not routine or is going to be outside of an on-call contract, requires a permit, or requires a new procurement initiative and a new construction contract, those types of things would be scoped out as a separate project and would be billed to districts directly. This is how we currently do this work. We just wanted to be clear about what would be included in the fixed fee and what would be billed directly through a project. And if there's any questions on that, I'd be happy to address those. So next steps, if there's consensus today, we would go back and prepare amendments to the IGAs, and we bring those back to the boards for approval.
Thanks, Ben. Questions for Ben or Keith? Mary Helen?
Oh, my question, and again, I'm going to rely on I'm not an accountant person. If this makes sense to you, then it makes it easier, then I support it. But I'm having a hard time deciding, because that last slide you showed with the little check boxes, routine, 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 how that would be any easier, because you'd have to track that and provide measurements, because if routine is easily measured. Once a month on the third Tuesday, you go out and do this, or that's kind of easily how I'm doing it in my head. But if there's a special project, then you have to go through the same thing that you're doing today. And so I kind of liken it to doing work contracting, because sometimes things take longer, and if there's a fixed fee involved, then you have to go through the process of saying, oh, but then it costs this much more money. I don't get the correlation of how that makes it easier for you if you have the same results reporting requirements.
I'll start that, address that first, Mary Ellen. There's always going to be some level of project work for some of these other districts. And on the projects, we track our time to the specific project anyway. So that's something we would be doing. What this eliminates is our need to track normal staff maintenance time and also the normal equipment time. That's equally cumbersome as the staff time.
Okay.
That's just done for normal routine maintenance or for the administrative work we're doing. That's going to eliminate a significant part of our ongoing tracking and billing. The project work, yeah, it'd be great if we could get rid of that, but we don't think that's realistic, because those are not predictable and they're so variable. We think that those still need to be billed as separate work for the other districts, but that's not going to be the majority of our billing work. It's going to be a small subset of the billing work that we're currently doing. So even with that, this still provides benefit to what we're doing. I should also clarify one thing too. What we're talking about billing through these fixed billings is staff costs and equipment costs that we're charging to the district. Third-party costs get directly billed to the other districts anyway, not by MCDD, but the other districts directly pay their vendors for third-party costs. So this is only for staff and equipment costs that we're creating this fixed billing proposal, because that's what we're billing through the interdistrict billings.
Okay, and then I see James has his hand up, and so I'm gonna interject and, well, ask him, because Penn One historically, funding levels are troublesome. And so their increase and putting a burden on them, and how that's going to be handled or resolved is yet to be determined in the urban district. But I don't know if that'll be a burden for them. So that's one, and that I see, because who's going to pay for it if the increase and they have difficulty now. So I'll be quiet and let James talk now.
Thanks, Mary Helen. James, do you want to?
Yeah, thank you, Mary Helen. And so I've got a lot to say. I'll probably talk through both sides of my mouth here. For starters, thank you for a very clear presentation, a very compelling presentation, as always. And on the one hand, I'm very supportive. It makes perfect sense, particularly the way you've outlined it. So here are my basic questions. One, is it worth it? We're going to go to a new funding model in 2 to 4 years. So is it worth making the change? If it is, great. I just put that out there as a question. Secondly, does it set up any kind of precedent or problem for the new district? Meaning landowners are going to be assessed using a new methodology. Just want to make sure this doesn't complement what will largely be a reset. I'm assuming is that the landowners will have a different calculation. So this is sort of temporary, because the districts are going to go, the sub-districts are going to go away. Is that true? Next is just a comment. Penn One has had historic problems with funding, its funding structure due to the land use and compression, but also it's a pretty easy district to get around. It's got so much public land. I just wonder if there's an efficiency there that's not really understood. And then my last comments are just, I think I heard that we can afford it, that there's money to make this change. So given the assessments and the revenues from City of Portland to cover operations and maintenance, I heard that we'll be able to afford that. I'd like confirmation of that, because if not, I just wonder who in Penn One is going to pay. I would be uncomfortable asking non-city partners to for an increase in their assessment or their contribution. I think we've largely forecasted city revenues for the next few years to cover operations and maintenance and special projects, so that Penn One is whole, and that all of the landowners, including the private landowners, can really expect their assessments to not increase more than what's allowable under inflation.
I'll try and tick those off one at a time. I wrote them down. Hopefully I captured it all. So is it worth it? Again, that comes back a little bit to one of our metrics for success here. It's worth it if we can implement this quickly, and if we're ready to go in August with IGA amendments and could make a July 1 effective date on this, then we get at least 2 years, probably 3 years of benefit of the staff savings on that. And this is operations staff time, but also a lot of our administrative and finance staff time that can really then be redirected into the work of setting up and doing the dissolution work for the new district. So we think it is worth it. But again, only if it can be done quickly and easily. If this is going to take 3 or 4 months and additional work to calculate it, then no, it's not. Then we would probably just say, let's not move forward with this. In my mind, I'm not seeing any precedent or problems for the new district, because we are already doing inter-district billings right now. This is just changing our methodology for that inter-district billing. I would certainly put this to brighter minds than me, but I don't see any precedent problems in this one. And then as far as the Penn One funding concerns, what the slide Ben showed compared the new billing method to what the budget is. And if our trend line is showing more than the budget, that may mean that we've been underestimating the inter-district billings on the budget. That would be one of the reasons why you'd see a trend line number that's higher than the budget number. So it's very possible that even though we've been budgeting a certain amount, the actual expenditures have been coming in higher than that, and that's what's causing that trend line to be higher. This it kind of locks that in, but it also provides certainty that you're not going to continue to see actual expense numbers that are significantly higher than our estimates or our budget numbers. And Ben's looked at the budget numbers. I'll defer to him on the actual budget and the impact on the budget and whether this could be absorbed without a significant assessment increase. But again, I just want to emphasize, we're not, when you saw those comparisons, those were to the budget, and the actual numbers could be higher or lower than the budget. So there's no guarantee that our actuals for this year would come out at the budget anyway. So Ben, I'll actually ask you if you want to weigh in any more on the budget question.
I don't know if there's much I could add other than, you know, James in Pen 1, oftentimes we see a little bit of budget savings. And so I suspect there wouldn't be significant impact to the payers, specifically the city, with what they've already planned to pay, if that makes sense. And I'm speaking specifically for fiscal year 2022-23.
So I just want to be clear, we don't anticipate a need to go back to City Council for an amendment in the appropriations as a result of this move to flat billing in the current fiscal year. We can't predict what the request would be for next fiscal year, although if you look at that trend line and you adopt it, then we do know what it is, and you could plan around that.
Correct.
Corky, you're next.
Well, sorry, or I want to, before this, lose sight of what Ben just said. I mean, you're not just focused on the public entities, are you? They're private property owners in Pen 1. And so can you kind of restate the thought process as far as the budget? And you said not a significant increase. Well, any increase is an increase. So help me understand that.
So let's just look at the current fiscal year. We have adopted the budget, and we've already increased the assessments to all the landowners across all districts, including Pen 1. And what I'm saying is for this fiscal year, we suspect that we will have sufficient budget savings in other line items that this will not be an impact to Pen 1's budget in this fiscal year. Hopefully that clarifies.
And I think that's safe to say that's true for all of the districts, correct? Yeah.
I would agree with that, yes.
Thank you. That's great. Thanks.
So I just want to recognize a time check here. We're getting past our allotted time. It looks like a very rich discussion. I just wanted to check with Wendy and Jim if we can continue on this, or should we continue it at the next meeting? Or can we forego another item on the agenda?
I'd like to continue if we may. I think we have a few people we haven't heard from, and then I think if it goes on much beyond 10 minutes, we maybe want to reconsider. Does that work for you, Wendy?
This is the last substantive issue on our agenda before.
We do have a Pen 1 presentation, and I think it would be good to get that done, but we could also reschedule that. I want to go back to one of our key premises here is if this takes a long time, the value of the change diminishes. And again, I don't mean to put pressure on you all. It's a big deal to make this change, and we don't have to do it if you're uncomfortable with it. We do see it as a potential pretty significant efficiency that allows us to provide services that are more consistent with our mission.
So let's continue on. Corky, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so you partially answered one of my questions just now, but I guess more specifically, I'm wondering what the cost estimate of this review and change, what you've already done, what you will be doing in order to make the change, and compare that to what are the cost savings, you know, I mean, what's that in dollars, you know, and these are just estimates, of course, you know, but are we, are we going to save ourselves $5 or $5 million? I'm kind of guessing it's something like $50,000. I don't know. That would be useful for me to have some grasp of whether this is really worth moving forward. But it is comforting to hear you guys acknowledge over and over again that, yeah, we've got to be careful here. It may not be worth the effort. So that's one, is to kind of what is that sort of in dollars perhaps would be helpful. And more generally, I'm still struggling with whether this is fair or not. And I guess I really need to hear from Pin 1 and SDIC regarding that, because if I understand this correctly, Pin 2 and MCDD will actually kind of benefit from this, but SDIC and Pin 1 would not benefit from it. And I'm not clear on the fairness of that. It seems like we're going from a system that maybe we didn't bill properly. So there's some questions there, but we attempted to bill for the amount of work in that district. And now we're just going to an acreage, and that raises some flags for me, I guess.
I'll start off on answering that. So the cost estimate, the benefit of this, I can't really put it in dollar amounts, but again, we estimate it's about 150 to 200 hours a month we're spending tracking and billing all this. So it's about 1 FTE of staff time. So that's the benefit of it. The cost of the implementation really, if say hypothetically you gave us a thumbs up today, like, yeah, we like this, let's go forward and do the IGA amendments, then it's just the staff time to make those IGA amendments and bring them back next month. It's not insignificant, but it's certainly far less than the time we're spending on the billings, even for this year, let alone the savings for next year. So rather than looking at a dollar amount, I'm looking at it in terms of labor and staff hours. We probably would have less hours to prepare the IGA amendments than just to do 1 month of billings going forward. So it's definitely a true savings for us.
But and staff hours, that is dollars. I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
So that works fine for me. And then I guess I'm wondering is, how does that equate to savings, particularly again for Pin 1 and SDIC?
Yeah, and I want to be a little cautious on that table because we're comparing what the billing amount would be under this proposal to the proposed budget. And the proposed budget was only based on an estimate of what we thought when we prepared the budget of what the billings were going to be. And I want to emphasize the actual billings for the year could be higher or lower than the budget anyway, just based on our hourly billings. So it's not really fair to say we're hitting Pen 1 harder just because it's higher than their budget. Their actual billings could come in higher than the budget anyway. And same with Pen 2, it looks like we're saving money relative to the budget, but the actual billings might have come in lower. So it's not really saying like you're going to be higher under this than you would have been anyway. It's saying it'll be a little more than the budget, and we wanted to put that in there to acknowledge it and say it is higher than the budgeted amount, but it's probably coverable. And then also, because we based it on the historical, it's not being based on acreage. It's not a flat allocation based on acreage. It's based on the historical trend line of the actual billing amounts. And we picked that because we thought that was probably one of the objectives here is try and do something that's consistent and not a radical change in terms of billing amounts. And that was done in interest of fairness and saying that if this is how much the agencies have been paying on a trend line basis over the years, odds are if we continue to do the variable billing and the detail billings, it probably would have continued roughly close to that trend line. So use that as the basis for establishing the fixed fee amount. And we did that in the interest of fairness. We thought that was probably the fairest way to do it, is based on the historical actuals that people were seeing. So I hope that answers your questions.
Again, I just want to do a time check. I want to recognize Pen 1's presentation. Jim, I'm just going to throw out, it seems like we may not get to a decision today, but I will let the other boards chime in if we want to continue this discussion. SDIC, we're not a quorum, so I don't have, Annalise is absent, Kenny as well. So
And
we're not
I
gonna
do
go-
think we got a positive reaction from Tanny. I don't want to speak for him, but I think that's accurate. Is that correct, Keith and Ben?
That was my read. Yeah.
Okay, again, I don't hold me to that, and I don't mean to put words in Tanny's mouth, but he seemed happy. But I'd like to hear from these others and see if maybe we're there. And if we're not, that's fine. We can, again, your call, board.
So are we continuing into Pen 1's time?
I would like to, if that's okay, Mr. Chair. I think we're close to the hearing from everyone, and then we can make a decision about whether there's a consensus or not. And if there isn't, then let's delay. If there is, then I would like to get direction to proceed with the amendments. But again, your call, boards and Mr. Chair.
Do you need a vote or anything at Pen 1?
No, I think we would just need, if those of you feel comfortable that we're on the right track, we can bring you a proposed IGA amendments, and we could finish the discussion there and have the vote then. There's
I've got a hard stop at 12:30. So.
Okay.
Nancy, why don't you go ahead? We're just gonna continue this discussion.
Thanks. I guess I just wanted to sum up what I'm hearing, which is it actually is more fair. You know, when I have my NCDD board hat on and I hear that NCDD landowners are subsidizing other landowners, I get a little alarmed. I need to be accountable to the folks that voted for me. But I also hear that there's a significant efficiency. There's an impact, but a small impact across the other three districts. Plus, it makes it easier to plan our budgets around all 4 districts. So I think, and I have been on the receiving side of bills and how late they come because everything's done in this, like, because there's so many steps because everything is kind of lots of nickels and dimes. And I really, really appreciate that we would save almost an FTE when there's so much work to be done modernizing. So I would just say, I think this is very thoughtful. Thank you for coming back with additional information, which I thought was needed. And I'm very comfortable with this, and I hope others are as well.
Thank you, Nancy. James?
Great, thank you. I just a few more points. I'm generally supportive for all the reasons mentioned. I want to recognize our partners, all the districts, including MCDD, for making this work heretofore. So I am supportive of this going forward, but I want to request some. I don't want to call these conditions, but I'd like some verification offline. For starter, I mean, one thing I just want to make sure people understand is that Pen 1's financial condition is based on city land use and compression. And I think everyone understands this, but the city is now independent of its assessments, funding Pen 1 operations and capital at an extra $200,000 to $400,000 a year. So that's what's keeping us in a good position now. So what I would like to understand is offline, I would like it if the district staff could push out to our partners, so Harsh, Metro, City, just what the change is from last year's assessment to this year's assessment, just showing that this new methodology is not affecting assessments. And then lastly, that there's an understanding that if we need to ask the city for more money to make sure that the district is whole, that we recognize the city budget process has a long lead to it. So if we get into the budget this year and we find we don't have enough money as a district, that's going to be more difficult than the planned effort we'd had before. That's the end of my comments.
Thanks, James. Ken?
Yeah, just wanted to say thank you to Keith and Ben. It really just shows that your expertise in these areas. This is far and above a lot of the things we're getting prior to your arrival, Keith and Ben. And I really appreciate it. It's kind of a complicated topic, but when this first arose, that the goal was efficiency, because we're spending a lot of time on billing that we could be using elsewhere more productively. And so I also have my MCD hat on, but I also have SDIC hat on too. But I'm all about fairness, and I do think I think this is a more fair, allocation just based on your explanation. And I realize it may present some issues for the other districts, but I also think there's a fairness issue there as well. So I fully support it. I ditto everything Nancy said, and so I don't need to repeat that, but I appreciate it.
Thanks, Ken. Keith, Ben, a quick question. Do you do would you anticipate doing a true up? Because these are based on projections. So if your costs are less, will you do a true up towards the year end?
We hadn't anticipated actually doing a true up because it's based on historical actuals anyway. It's not based on budget. So what I think we could build into this though is rather than locking ourselves into the trend line for the next 2 to 3 years, that trend line wasn't hard to calculate. We could recalculate that trend line when we see the fiscal 21-22 actuals and see if the trend line changed. And if it did, then reassess the next fiscal year based on that. It wouldn't change the 22-23 assessments or the 22-23 fixed billings, but it might change the 23-24 fixed billings. That would be probably the simplest and best way to true it up, is just do it when we have one more year of history and then recalculate it.
And then
If it's ever some extraordinary thing, we would come back to you all and say,
Yeah.
hey, this happened. We need to change this up.
Yeah, yeah. If we had to say another pandemic and maintenance couldn't go do any work for 3 months, that would be a substantive change that we would have to come back and talk about an adjustment to the billing. But small adjustments, I think we can just capture them by just extending our trend line calculation by one more year.
I mean, even the trending for the last 5 years has really been disrupted with the pandemic. So I would question if that's a really good indicator of what our needs are, unless we're in a pandemic for the next 5.
Please,
Yeah, we
did normalize that.
We did, yeah.
Mary Helen, and then I guess we'll go to
okay. You answered, Tom's question, but mine was at the end of whatever billing period. You said that you were going to track charges, and you track those now. And whatever you're going, these is assessed or assumed charges. But what if in the end you didn't really need to do the things, or it was cheaper or more expensive? I think that's going to be important to know, because otherwise you're getting charged. How would you report the fact that you billed Pen 2 for X amount of hours, 100 hours? That's just easy for me to say. And then in the end, you found out that it really was 125 hours or 75 hours.
This proposal only works if we're able to stop tracking the time and equipment billings.
Okay.
So we would not have any way at any point in the future to say, well, gee, our actual billings would have been higher. That really wouldn't come into play. Again, basing it on the history, we're assuming that history over time is a reasonable average of the effort spent on maintenance and administrative activities. If there's significant discrete items that cause a significant spike, those would be billed as projects. Just as if you've been paying, if you had a significant capital project in one of the districts in a prior year, that was billed as a project, and that's not baked into the fixed fee billings. The fixed fee billings are only for the routine maintenance and administrative work that's been taking place.
Okay, there's no anticipated major change in any of that. It's the stuff that we have to do every day.
So for my simplistic mind, you'll say, we're going to do everything we're doing now for X amount of dollars. We're going to keep the drainage districts from overflowing, and it's going to cost X amount of dollars, and we'll pay you $500 or $5,000, whatever it is. We'll pay you that amount of money. So we're just paying for a product, and you're going to do it regardless of how long it takes you or doesn't take you. Yay, thank you for abiding by my little bit of accounting that I do. Okay, thanks.
I feel I need to apologize to Pen 2 for moving into your allotted time. So my apologies.
It was at my request, Mr. Chair, so I'll take the blame.
Yeah, I allowed it though. So I need to share, I'm concerned with Tanny and Annalise not being here for SDAC. So, I generally support it, but we don't have quorum. So I'm nervous about, giving a yay. I know I heard Ken's position, but he wears 2 hats. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
Tom, how about I check with those 2 individually and see if they're comfortable with us bringing a draft proposed IGA amendment. If they're not, I'll report back to everyone. And if they are, again, you reserve the right to vote no on the proposed amendment or tell us, we thought about this some more, it's not worth it. And that would be okay. Again, we'll probably invest a couple of 3-5 hours to get those IGAs drafted. I think that's worth the risk.
I appreciate that, Jim. Thank you.
Okay.
Are we going to pull the SDAO board training opportunity? Are we going to go on?
It's pretty quick.
It's a simple request face-to-face, especially for MCDD board members. This is a great opportunity to sign up for training, and it will save you on your insurance billing. So win-win. And if you run out of time and you actually can't do it, we still get the discount. So I just, I need at least 2 people from MCDD to sign up. So I ask you to strongly consider doing that and let me know. And you can let me know right now in the chat or verbally.
And we'll schedule that around your needs within the constraints of SDAO, correct?
Oh, no. So this is independent study online. You can do it at your leisure or not do it. This is independent. In addition, MCDD will be doing a board evaluation of 90 minutes in September, and that's totally separate than this.
Thank you. Thank you, Kenzie.
And thank you, Mary Helen, for being the first person to sign up.
Well, and all I say is it took me about 10 minutes and they responded right away. And then you don't have to do anything else. So it's just like fill in this form. You want to be part of the academy, say yes. I said yes, and they responded back. And so it was very easy, and the rewards, I guess, seemed to be great. So it wasn't hard at all. 5 minutes of your time.
Thanks.
This is Val Humble. I'll plan to sign up too, so Pen 2 should have the 2 required.
Thank you, Val.
Wendy, I saw Kenzie had it as well.
Thank you, Kenzie. I'm asking you to sign up by the beginning of September. Sooner the better, so you remember.
Mary Helen, you still have your hand up?
No, I just don't click well. There.
Understood. Thank you, Wendy. Do you have what you need?
I just need one more person from MCDD if you're willing. So that would be great.
I'll get back to you, Wendy.
Thanks, Nancy.
And I'll be Nancy's backup if she doesn't do it.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks, everyone.
That's wonderful cooperation.
You're muted, Tom.
There was a new business. I know there's a report on our financial position as well as a letter from Jim. Any comments on that material? Jim, anything, or Keith, anything you want to add to those documents?
No, we are really excited to have a new director of finance and administration starting on August 15th. Lori Baker will be coming to us from the Education Service District with a long history of special district service and a long background in accounting and finance supervision. So I know our finance team's really excited, and I want to once again really extend my appreciation to Keith for coming out of retirement to help us out while we have that gap. It's been a true pleasure and a huge benefit to me personally to have you here, Keith. Thank you so much.
I just want to add thank yous to Keith because he's been responsive to all my crazy accounting questions, and he's understood what I'm asking, which is rarely acknowledged in accounting world. So thank you for helping me understand so many things as a board director. I very much appreciate it. And I hope you finally get to enjoy your retirement.
Moving on, I guess we're ready to adjourn Pen 2 or Pen 2 and MCDD. Ken?
Well, MCDD calling for adjournment. We're adjourned.
And Val?
Ms. Val Humble for Pen 2. Pen 2 is now adjourned.
Yeah, and my apologies. It's Pen 1 we owe our deepest sympathy to for running over. My mistake. And
I'll be sure and bill SDIC for the overage. How about that?
So James, I'm turning it over to you to manage your wily bunch. Thank you all.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you to all the board members and staff. Jim, I wonder, given the time left and we're down, it looks like we're down 2 of our 5 board members, including our representative from Portland Park. I wonder if I'm certainly available. I've got a hard stop at 1 to go over the drainage master plan, which I'm very much interested in looking at. I just wonder if we should wait for parks and metro staff to be here. I hate to,
May I give Bill or McKenna a chance just to offer their thoughts? And I'm sorry, McKenna, because I know you were ready for this presentation. I know it's really a great one, but I think that might not be a bad idea, but I don't know what the urgency is here on this.
I think that'd be fine. Either we can push it to August or maybe find another time before then. Yeah, that should be fine.
McKenna, was there any time constraints on meeting, like necessarily? Is
No.
there a timeline? Okay. Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah.
We owe you for being ready and not taking advantage of your readiness, and that's on me, but I felt like the efficiency gain was worth the conversation, so my regrets to all of you for keeping you late and messing up the agenda.
And we might consider maybe having this as the first or preliminary agenda item during the next format meeting in August, so we have time to get through.
Yeah, or we can schedule a Pen 1 meeting at a convenient time and do it that way. Okay, we will follow up. McKenna, I'm really sorry.
I'm sorry, Jim, for interrupting you. Just so that would entail meeting before 11 a.m. rather than meeting at the end of the meeting. So in order to have
let's go offline and come up with a recommendation and chat with board members about availability. Does that work for everyone? Is that okay? We don't have the right board members here to come up with a time, but we could either do it at the next format or and schedule it in, or try and find a separate time. Is that okay with everyone?
Either approach works for me. I know it's so difficult to get people together, but I understand a lot of work has gone into this, and I do think we're down to two board members here now, and I think that having all the board members there would be ideal. Jeff Noodleman has a long history with the board, obviously having parks representation and metro, as well as the board. Having us all there, I think, is important, not just to view the content of what's being presented, but also along with that, this is an accomplishment. This was a long time in coming, and I would like it to have meaning for the board, for them to use it to have better understanding of what the state of drainage within the district and our opportunities. So I would like it, if at all possible, we're all in attendance, and I'm happy to do my part to reach out to board members to encourage or do some polling for when they might be available. And I apologize to McKenna and Bill for us not being available today.
Yeah, and I think I own most of that for extending that other discussion. So sorry, guys. All right, I think we have good direction. Next steps to come. I also think this drainage master plan has a lot to say to the urban board as we move forward with more integrated approaches to managing water. So I'm excited about it and want to thank McKenna and Bill for their leadership in getting it done. There's a lot of good stuff in there. So,
one last thing, I know that McKenna's team engaged in stakeholder engagement throughout the process, but if there's anyone you want us to forward the presentation to as optional, they're not necessarily board members, but if there's any opportunity for others to attend for the sake of just highlighting what was understood and accomplished, that's certainly something I can do.
Yeah, I wonder about some of the members of the city MOU task force working on the PMLS. That might be there might be some key people there who would benefit from this understanding.
Yeah, sounds good. And I mean, I guess this gives you more time to maybe review it if you haven't gotten a chance yet. So I also just want to say, if you have any like preliminary questions or anything that comes up before we meet, feel free to reach out and I can just make sure I touch on that.
Thanks, McKenna. Okay, I don't think we have other business. One last apology to you, McKenna. I'm so sorry, but trying to wring the most out of our staff as we can on the admin side.
Well, I guess that's up to me to adjourn Pen 1. Is that where we're at right now?
You're in charge. You're between us and lunch.
Okay, well, for the many staff, thank you for your efforts. Sorry we can't meet today. PJ, thank you for being here today, and Pen 1 is adjourned.
And if any of you are looking for another board meeting, you can come to the SDIC landowners meeting this afternoon. If you're looking for something to do, it's going to be a good one.
Thanks, everyone.
I don't think I'll see you there. See you guys.
Bye.
Thank you.